Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I'll show you a supernatural horror film named Consecration. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins by showing a woman named Grace walking along a peaceful street. Out of nowhere, a nun approaches her with a gun. She narrates his brother used to believe that she had a guardian angel, but she doesn't believe in supernatural things. The nun points a gun at her, and this scene foreshadows Grace's fate. The scene then moves back to earlier when Grace is in the hospital working as an ophthalmologist. She's checking up on an old patient with a severe eye problem, so she recommends the case to her mentor. She comes back home and the lights go off while she's busy on her computer. She feels the presence of something in the house. She checks outside and a ghostly figure of a nun shows itself behind her. The telephone suddenly rings. As she answers the phone, the caller reports that her brother is found dead in the monastery located in the isolated mountains. The caller says they are investigating whether her brother's death is murder or suicide. She travels to the location of the monastery where a detective welcomes her. She wants to see her brother, but the body is not yet ready for seeing. Detective then drives her to the monastery to inform her about the events. Along the way, he tells her that the body of a priest was found dead in the monastery. This leads to an assumption that her brother murdered the priest first, then took his own life after. Grace responds that her brother will never kill someone or himself. Detective wonders how her brother got involved in a hardcore sect. Apparently, the nuns in the monastery have a hardcore belief. One of the nuns claims to have seen the devil, and she cut her eye because of it. Grace says her brother is simply a devotee of the church, while she does not believe in religion. Detective and Grace soon arrive at the monastery. The leader of the nuns in the monastery, called Mother Superior, welcomes the two of them. She tells Grace it's not her brother that killed the priest, but the demon did it, and the brother killed himself after an encounter with the demon. But Grace did not believe her bullshit. She still holds on to believing that her brother was murdered. After that, Grace proceeds to enter the monastery. It's then revealed Mother Superior is holding a cross and her hands are bleeding after an encounter with Grace. Detective proceeds to show Grace where the body of her brother was found. As it appears, it was found on a rocky cliff by the ocean. After that, she checks on the body and weeps like a chicken as she takes a look at him. The brother's body appears to have bruises. There, she has a vision of her brother, saying that it's not safe for her to stay there. After that, Grace passes out and the nurses in the convent administer sedatives to her. The young nun is looking after her. A newly assigned priest in the monastery, Father Romero, arrives in her room. He asks her if she has a family to accompany her, but it turns out that her mother is already dead, while her father is kept in prison for killing her mother. Later, Grace escapes the convent and rides a taxi out of there. She drops by the seaside facing the cliff where her brother has fallen to death. She then has a vision of nuns falling out off the cliff one after the other. As she's having a horrifying vision, she passes out and falls into the ocean. She then soon wakes up back in the convent. She walks out of the room only to find all of the nuns walking to the hall. Mother Superior is conducting a prayer as the nuns are about to eat lunch. Right there, Grace accuses her of concealing evidence. Grace looks for her clothes and her phone since she needs to make a call. Mother Superior tells her that her phone was lost in the seawater after the taxi found her. Father Romero fetches Grace from the hall. They come to the cliff where he explains to her the history of the monastery. The remains of the old church are still standing on the cliff. Father Romero explains the church was used to host religious artifacts. Near the cliff, there is a stone embedded in the ground. He then explains that the Crusaders stepped back for every sin they committed. This means that if they have too much sin, they will fall off the cliff. He and Grace walk back to the monastery. They talk about the development of the investigation into her brother's death. She thinks that Mother Superior washed her brother's body to remove any evidence, but he explains the body was cleaned out of respect for her brother and that the act was already reported to detective. He says he will soon consecrate the convent to regain its sacredness, so he will be transparent in removing any form of lies in the convent before its consecration. He then reveals her brother's possessions to her. She takes a look at the box in private and finds her brother's diary in the box, which is written on their childhood code. In the diary, her brother mentioned that Grace had no memory of her life before she was adopted into the family and that she has the ability to see supernatural things. Triggered by that, Grace gains some vague memory that their father found her in the sea during a storm. Later on, Father Romero confronts the nuns in the monastery. Mother Superior tells him that Grace cannot be trusted. She says he's underestimating Grace's power. At night, Grace continues to read her brother's diary. There, her brother says darkness comes into their lives disguised as a miracle. But at this point, she does not know the meaning of these words. Suddenly, she hears a nun shouting for her help outside. She walks out to check for it. She walks through the woods and gains a vision of the young nun solemnly praying. In her vision, the young nun cut herself in the wrist. The vision then fades away, and the young nun reveals herself behind Grace. She explains that the place is her secret hideaway and shares that she feels like a bad person. Grace says the young nun is a good person. She then requests a telephone from the young nun. She calls her mentor, reporting that her brother was murdered and she's experiencing hallucinations. However, the mentor explains it might be because of her grievances. Mother Superior enters the room and asks Grace to share her visions. Grace refuses to share it. So Mother Superior says the vision is Grace's memories from her past and future. The next day, Grace asks the young nun about her clothes. The nun answers that her clothes are still being cleaned. Detective asks Mother Superior why she cleaned the brother's body. She reasons that the act of cleaning the brother's body is to make him presentable to God. But Detective doubts that Mother Superior can carry the brother's body out of the beach. He then tells her that she might be put in jail for cleaning the evidence. Meanwhile, a painting caught Grace's attention. Father Romero tells her the painting means that the devil lurks in the shadow of temptations. The two then talk about her brother's diary. She says the diary is written in a code, since her brother doesn't want anyone to read other than her. Later, Grace remembers her childhood memories. Her father miraculously survived drowning, and he came home. She was in a cage, and her father was furious with her. She requested that she take a pee, and while walking, she threw a key to her mother, who was also in the cage. Her mother got the key and ran away from their home, so her father chased her mother along the woods. While freeing her brother from the cage, she heard a loud scream outside. It turned out that her father stabbed her mother to death. Her father walked back to them, saying it was Grace's fault. Just then, her father dropped to the floor, unconscious. Back to the present, Grace approaches Father Romero, who is busy preparing for the consecration. She asks him about the fact that the convent tried to adopt her and her brother. She suspects that's the reason why her brother came to the convent, but she's only told that, according to Mother Superior, her brother came for the truth about the relic. He then suggests reading books about the convent. The scene then moves back to the past, when Grace and her brother were brought to the convent. The priest attempted to kill Grace in the car, but a truck hit the car, which saved Grace's life. That night, Grace reads about the relic. It is said in the book that the knights in the past used to guard the relic. She then gains a vision of a young girl guarded by the knights. After that, she roams around the convent and gains a vision of the priest being interrogated about the relic. Just then, a nun tries to attack her with a knife. However, a mysterious force prevents the nun and controls the nun's hand. In the end, the forced nun ends up stabbing herself to death. After that, Detective interrogates Grace about the death of her brother. It turns out that the nun she encountered earlier witnessed her brother's death, but she explains the nun had killed herself. The next day, Detective frees Grace from detention. It turns out a witness calls, confirming Grace's story about the death of the nun. Meanwhile, Detective is still keeping Mother Superior in detention. Afterward, Grace drives to the prison where she visits her imprisoned father. Her father appears to be still furious at her. She asks her father why he mistreats her during her childhood. To her surprise, the father says she is a devil and he should have killed her. He says he already died in the storm. She reports that her brother is already dead, so the father tells her to resurrect her dead brother. He claims that he had already died in the past, but she resurrected him. He believes she prayed for his resurrection, but it is the devil who answered her prayer. He then shares that someone threw her into the sea as a child, but she miraculously survived. This makes her father believe that she has a demonic power. After that, she drives back to the convent. Meanwhile, Mother Superior tells Detective that the brother had already found the relic. He wanted to return the relic to them to put it under the convent's control, but the brother cannot overcome the relic because of her immense power. At this point, Mother Superior reveals that Grace is the relic. This explains Grace's capacity to resurrect herself and other people from death. Grace walks back to the convent where the consecration is commencing. She walks inside, looking for Father Romero. There, the nuns appear to be scared of her. The one-eyed nun tries to stab her to death, but again, a powerful force prevents the nun from doing it. The force breaks the nun's arm. The young nun runs to the woods out of fear, and Grace chases after her. The young nun decides to kill herself to avoid being taken by Grace. When Grace arrives there, the young nun cuts her wrist. Grace then gains a vision of the bloody young nun who is dead in front of her. At this point, she realizes that she must be the one bringing the death around the convent. She walks back to the convent and asks for Father Romero's help. He aims to consecrate her to suppress her power and drive her away from the devil. After that, the nuns carry her body and bring her to the altar. There they put her in a tomb to finally consecrate her. As the nuns are sealing the tomb, Father Romero prepares a prayer. Just then, the demonic force pushes the sword out of a statue and it falls to Father Romero. The sword ends up stabbing him in the back, which causes his eventual death. Grace walks out of the tomb and realizes that Father Romero will seal her in the tomb. At this point, she realizes that she must possess a demonic power. She rushes out of the convent and comes to the cliff where her brother died. She asks for her brother's forgiveness and attempts to jump on the cliff. Just then, Detective comes to stop her, but she still jumps off the cliff. It's then revealed that she really has demonic power, but she appears to be unaware of it. At this point, it's revealed that it is her own force that's protecting her from death. When the priest tried to kill her child, her force caused the car to crash. It is also her force that stopped the nun from stabbing her and the one that pushed the sword toward Father Romero. It's shown that her spirit also witnessed the death of her brother. Back to the present, Detective can't find any trace of Grace's body. Mother Superior tells Detective that Grace is still alive because she has incredible power. Meanwhile, Grace is back to her old life as an ophthalmologist. She appears to have forgotten all of the events. So she lives her life as if nothing happened. Her mentor is amazed that Grace manages to heal the incurable eye disease of her old patient. It turns out that she used her demonic power to make her patient see again. In the end, Mother Superior attempts to shoot Grace to death, but her demonic power makes her survive again. A car hits Mother Superior to death, and Grace continues to live as her demonic power saves her again. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.